Welcome to Diplomacy and International Relations by Bastian Fribourg. All right, today we're going to tackle a really big, and I mean really controversial idea. It's one that basically turned the world of political thought on its head right as the Cold War was wrapping up.
So, picture this. It's 1989. The Berlin Wall is literally crumbling to the ground. And right in the middle of all that chaos and excitement, this political scientist, Francis Fukuyama, comes out with a claim so massive, so bold, that we are still debating it decades later.
He said, we had reached the end of history. Now hold on. What does that actually mean? Because I can almost guarantee you it's not what you're thinking.
Okay, so the first thing we have to get straight is what he wasn't saying. He wasn't saying that, stuff would stop happening. Of course there would still be wars, there'd still be conflict, newspapers would still have headlines. His point was about ideas. He believed that the big, epic, ideological battles that had defined the last century, the grand struggles over how societies should be organized, that those were finally over. Think about it. He looked at the 20th century as this huge, knockdown, drag-out fight between competing ideologies. First, fascism gets defeated in World War II. Then, boom, communism just spectacularly collapses. And when the dust settled, what was left? Liberal democracy. And for Fukuyama, this wasn't just like a temporary win. It looked like the final answer, the ultimate solution to that age-old question, what's the best way for us to govern ourselves?
And the wild thing is, back in the early 90s, this didn't sound like some crazy out there academic theory. To a lot of people, it just felt true. It felt like he was simply describing the reality that was unfolding right in front of their eyes. I mean, you had the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Soviet Union dissolving. There was this incredible feeling of unstoppable momentum. People were talking about a worldwide liberal revolution. All these new democracies were popping up from Latin America to Eastern Europe. It really genuinely felt like a new global consensus was being born, all centered on these core ideas of liberty and, basic human equality. But fast forward to where we are today, and suddenly that whole idea of history being over feels, well, a little naive, doesn't it? Because, let's be honest, that triumphant feeling did not last. The last couple of decades have thrown one massive challenge after another at this idea, and it's got a lot of people asking, wait a minute, has history made a roaring comeback? And these challenges are coming from literally all sides. From the outside, you've got the rise of the China model, which seems to prove that you can have incredible economic growth under authoritarianism. But then, from the inside, you've got the surge of ethno-nationalist populism across the West. On top of all that, public trust is just cratering, partly because the internet is constantly digging up so-called inconvenient truths, and then you have these intense ideological fights happening within liberalism itself. And then, of course, a lot of critics point the finger right back at the West. You have scholars like Shea Chung-an, for example, who argue that U.S. foreign policy wasn't really about spreading democracy at all.
They'd say it was driven by pretty selfish motives. The argument goes that interventions in places like Iraq and Afghanistan were less about freedom and more about protecting powerful financial interests, often destabilizing entire regions in the process. But here's the thing. This is only one side of the coin. To really, really get what Fukuyama was saying, we have to go deeper than just politics and economics. We have to look at a much more philosophical claim he was making about human nature itself. See, Fukuyama's big idea wasn't really just about capitalism or elections. The true engine driving his whole argument, it's a much older concept, one he borrowed from the philosopher Hegel, and it gets right to the very core of what makes us tick as human beings. He called it thymos. And the argument is that the main thing driving all of human history isn't the economy, it's not resources. It's this deep, uniquely human need to be recognized, to be seen as having dignity and worth. Think about it. It's the source of pride you feel when you're valued. It's that flash of anger when you're disrespected. It's the shame you feel when you let yourself down. It is that fundamental part of us that just demands respect. Now, this desire for recognition, it kind of has two sides. First, there's isothemia. That's the demand to be recognized as equal to everyone else. And liberal democracy, it's brilliant at this. It gives everyone universal rights, says we all have dignity. It ticks that box. But then there's megalothemia. And that's the desire to be recognized as superior to others, the drive to be the best, to achieve more, to stand out from the crowd. So what happens to that incredibly powerful human drive in a world that's built on the idea that everyone is equal?
And this question leads us to maybe the most chilling part of his entire thesis, his warning about the last man. Just imagine a person at the end of history. They live in a world of perfect safety, total comfort. They have no great causes to fight for, zero ambition for greatness, and they would never dream of risking their life for some higher ideal. They're just content. Content with their own comfortable self-preservation. For Fukuyama, this last man is a figure of contempt. Someone who has, in a very real sense, stopped being fully human.
Which brings us full circle, right back to the mess and turmoil we see today. And here's what's so fascinating. Fukuyama kind of saw all this coming. He actually anticipated this pushback. He never thought the transition would be clean or easy. He wrote that the rise of new strongmen or democracy's backsliding, that this wasn't the birth of some new, viable, alternative ideology. No, he saw it as the last desperate, violent gasps of an old, dying model. A death rattle, he called it, on the long, messy road to the end of history. And all of this leaves us with one huge final question.
So that's the real question, isn't it? Has history actually restarted? Are we witnessing a true return of ideological struggle? Or are we just living through the last loud, violent death throes of a world that has, in a way, already ended? A lot to think about there. Hey, and just a quick note, if you're enjoying this deep dive, you can help keep the show running and get access to extra episodes by subscribing on Spotify. It's a small monthly fee, and the link is right there in the description. And finally, please be sure to follow us and maybe leave a 5-star rating if you can. It really helps us reach more people. Thanks so much for listening.